In this video, I'm going to show you the most commonly asked Kaiser Permanente interview questions and help you plan great answers that will maximize your chances of being hired. So let's look at how you actually go about passing a Kaiser Permanente interview. And the first thing you need to do is don't mess up the basics. Get the basics right. So show up on time and dress for the occasion. And by that, I mean dressing formally. And that makes a good first impression. The next thing, you have to have studied Kaiser Permanente. They will ask about your knowledge of the organization, and if you don't have it, it can cost you the job. You need to turn up prepared, and I will help you do that preparation in this video. You need to know the questions that they most commonly ask, and more importantly, you need to have answers prepared for those. And in this video, I will help you prepare answers to the most common questions. And by the end of the video, you will feel much more confident and you will have answers ready to go for the most important and most common questions. So let's start with a question that I think is incredibly important and is why I put it right at the very beginning, which is, what do you know about Kaiser Permanente? And they expect you to have knowledge, and I'm going to show you the knowledge that you need. And to answer this, you start with the obvious. Convince them that you know the basics of their organization. Then you've got to show that you're well prepared, that you've actually taken some effort to get prepared for your interview. They would rather hire someone who has done preparation than someone who hasn't, obviously. But then you want to go beyond that. You want to show a deeper understanding than most people who turn up to the interview. And I'm going to help you do that. So let's look at some key facts and phrases that you can take to your interview to answer this question. So the first thing you do is memorize these 4 words, which is Integrated Managed Care Consortium. That is a simple and clear description of what Kaiser Permanente is. Then you can expand on that. They aim to provide high quality, affordable healthcare services. That's what they're all about. Then you can say that they offer health plans that employers typically can pay a premium, and that covers their employees and provides them with healthcare services when they need them. They aim to provide, of course, high quality care, and Kaiser Permanente has a very strong track record of winning awards and ranking very highly for their quality of care. They are an integrated primary and secondary care organization. So they offer both sides. They have their primary care network and they have their hospital network. And those two networks talk to each other. They work well and complement each other so they can provide coordinated care. So you can see your primary care physician and then be referred straight to a specialist in the same organization straight away, and it's a much more efficient way of organizing it. They have the Permanente medical groups that are physician owned, so they could be a doctor's office that are owned by the physicians that work there. They are for profit from the perspective of the doctors. The doctors make money from these, but the organization overall is non-profit. But importantly, the doctors that work at Kaiser Permanente are salaried, which is really very important, because in many organizations, if doctors prescribe more or they order more tests, they get paid per thing that they do. Whereas at Kaiser Permanente, when they're salaried, that frees them from that. And as a result, they get to basically provide evidence-based medicine where they don't have an incentive to do unnecessary tests or have money getting in the way of their care in the same way that can permeate many other hospital organizations. They focus on total health, and by that I mean things like preventative medicine, where they're caring for the entire individual rather than just caring for them in times of crisis. You can then go on to talk about their founding. So you've got Henry J. Kaiser, who the name comes from, and he was a philanthropist and he was a businessman. And then you've got Sidney R. Garfield, who was a physician that started the first part of the organization. And the official organization was founded in 1945, but they do have some history before that, which is worth reading about. They are overall a non-profit organization, which makes them very unique in the American healthcare system and is one of the things that distinguishes them from a lot of other organizations. They now have their own medical school and they have research institutes and are actively involved in medical research to support their members and further our understanding of medicine. So feel free to screenshot this or take any notes that you need. I would recommend also reading on their website and reading their Wikipedia page just to get a better feel for their organization, and then you'll be really well prepared for this, and that will pass a major hurdle to getting the job, which is demonstrating the knowledge they're looking for in the interview. So let's move on and look at another question that is extremely important, which is, why do you want to work here? Why have you chosen this place? And so we're going to look at how you can answer this. So the first thing is what makes Kaiser Permanente stand out. And if you've been paying attention to the last section, you will know the things that stand out about them. And so you'll have some things to discuss. You can talk about that you have a vision alignment, that what Kaiser Permanente stands for and their values and your personal values match up, and that this is the right organization and you would rather work here than anywhere else. And you want to make that very clear, that their non-profit status is something that actually attracts you to them, that you would rather work in a non-profit setting than a for-profit setting. You may say that they have been ranked in many rankings as one of the best places to work, and you can look up, if you type into Google, Kaiser Permanente, best places to work, and you can see their positions in the rankings and how people have rated them as an employer that is better than many other employers. You could say that this is a place where you feel that you're able to make a positive impact on society, and that Kaiser Permanente has a good track record of delivering outstanding care. And you may look at the particular hospital or organization that you're applying to and see if it is ranked on any great rankings or it's won any awards, and you could talk about that as something that has attracted you. Then you need to think, why is this the right career for you? Why is Kaiser Permanente matching up with your career goals? So you could say things like, it's a perfect match for my skills, and explain what skills you have and how you can deploy them at Kaiser Permanente. You could say that you love working with patients, so you're really enthusiastic about working in this industry, that you have a very caring nature, and as a result, this is the right career move, particularly if you're early in your career. Things like saying you're very caring and you enjoy working with patients and the public, that is something that can be positive. Then you can think about development and progression opportunities. So if you're ambitious, if you're someone that always wants to learn, that Kaiser Permanente actually invests in that. So they provide lifelong learning. There's a lot of information on their website about their lifelong learning programs. They provide CPD to help people develop. So CPD is continuing professional development. And then you can talk about research, particularly if you're applying in a medical part, that you're really interested in being involved in some research, and you see that as very important and very interesting. And then definitely say that you see Kaiser Permanente as providing a long-term career, and that you can see yourself growing and developing within the organization, because they would rather hire people that are going to stay a long time than people who are just looking to work for a short time and go somewhere else. And then to really make your answer stronger, be enthusiastic, show some enthusiasm, show some passion for the job and the role and a real deep interest in it, and that will come across positively. So again, you might want to note down some of these. Not everyone on the list will match up with what you want to say, but I would pick a few of those and then structure an answer based on that. And I would definitely have bullet points ready for this. It comes up all the time. So if you have a simple bullet pointed answer, maybe 6-7 bullet points, and you run through it and practice it a few times, when they say, why do you want to work for Kaiser Permanente? You can just jump into your bullet points and you'll have a strong, confident answer. The next one that often comes up is, what is your greatest weakness? And this is not a question you want to be ambushed by. You don't want to go, oh, I'm not sure, and then struggle to think of one. It's good to have one ready in case it comes up. And you want to have thought about it carefully, because if you pick the wrong one, it's hard to backtrack and it's hard to change your mind halfway through. So let's look at the elements of a good answer. So you want to show that you're reflective. So you want to show that you actually know what your weaknesses are and you know what you need to work on. That's one thing they're looking for. Then what are you doing about it? You've got this weakness. Are you just going to live with it? What are you actually going to do to get over this weakness? And then the most important thing is make sure it's something that's not important to your job. So look at the job description and do not say anything that they're listing as what they're looking for. It has to be something that is a weakness, but isn't going to stop you being good at your job. And then when you answer it, you say something like, a key area that I have identified as a current weakness that I'm eager to address is, say your weakness. Don't go into great detail about it. Don't talk about how this weakness is crippling you and ruining your entire life and is going to make you the worst employee that has ever worked here and will destroy everything in your life. Just say what it is and move on quickly. And when you move on quickly, you go, to develop and overcome this weakness, I plan to, and talk about what you're doing. Spend the time talking about your development and your improvement and how you're overcoming the weakness, and don't spend much time talking about the weakness itself. It's more important to do something about it than to explain why it's such a problem, because you're basically explaining why you shouldn't get the job. So let's look at bad answers and good answers. So some awful answers would be to say something like, I don't have any, because that shows you're not reflective and it's also not true. To say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. Well, great. that's not really a weakness, and you're just trying to dodge the question. And then if you were to say, I faint at the sight of blood, and you're applying to be a trauma doctor, that's not going to go down very well. So make sure it's something that's relevant to the job. I'm going to give you some suggestions, but you need to think very carefully about them. So you may say you can only speak English, because the easy thing to talk about is how you're hoping to learn another language in future. Or you may have started the process of learning that and you see that as a weakness. That's one that you could talk about. But if you're applying in a region that is very heavily, for example, Spanish speaking, large population, you may decide not to use that one. If you're not very good at public speaking, you're applying for a job that isn't going to involve public speaking, that could be a good weakness for you. Leadership, if you're applying for a non-leadership role. Delegation, if you've not got anyone to delegate to and you're not actually in charge of anyone, that's a good weakness to say, because you can talk about, in 5 years when you hope to move into a position of more leadership, that you'll develop those skills in time, because right now you're not leading anyone, so it doesn't matter if that's a weakness. And then if you're applying for a job that doesn't involve any math, then you could talk about that as a weakness and something that you could develop, and that will be developed by the time that you would actually potentially need to use that. So the key to this is really picking something that is not important and then spending the time talking about how you're going to overcome it. So think very carefully and have one weakness ready and a few suggestions of how you're going to overcome it, and you'll get through this question. The next question is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And again, you want to have some sort of plan. You don't need to have an immense amount of detail. You just need to have a rough idea of where you're going. So let's look at how to answer this and how not to answer this. So it has to be, of course, credible. So if you say something that's very silly, you won't be taken seriously. You've got to have some sensible plan. It has to, of course, be very clearly thought out. If it's not clearly thought out, then it doesn't look credible. A good idea is to have a look at LinkedIn. Look at people who work at Kaiser Permanente. Just have a look through. You don't, of course, need to add them. Just look at where they were about 5 years ago and where they are now. And that will give you an idea of what sort of progression is available if that's what you're looking for. Then think about development, learning, and improvement. So your answer needs to talk about what you're going to learn, what you're going to get better at, how you're going to grow within the organization, rather than talking about in 5 years, I'm going to be the boss of everything because I'm so super brilliant and you're going to eventually learn how fantastic I am. That's not really a good way of answering it. You need to be earning and deserving of any progression that you've showed through your learning, development, and improvement, that you have earned any future positions. And then you have to think about, what does Kaiser Permanente have to offer? How is it going to be part of your journey? Then we look at bad answers. So something that's not believable just makes you look not very credible. That it shouldn't be insulting or insensitive to the interviewer. Some of the worst answers are saying, well, I want to be where you're sitting in 5 years. And then the person you're talking to has actually been there for 15 years and this is the first interview they've ever done. That doesn't look very good. So don't say things like that. Don't talk about being the boss of the person who's interviewing you, or something that may be quite insulting to the interviewer, because they are the person that is deciding whether you get the job or not, and insulting them is a bad idea. Then people that have sort of expectations rather than earning anything, that they just talk about being in this high-paying promotion automatically with no explanation of how they're going to get there. That they say, in 5 years, I want to go here, then jump to here, then jump to here. And it's like, well, why are you going to be there? Why do you deserve to be there? How have you developed and earned that? And you look at your qualifications now, and you look at the job that you're saying you want to be in 5 years, and there's a massive gap that you're not qualified for that role. So you have to think about how you're going to be qualified for that. But the most important thing is, don't talk about anything that doesn't enhance Kaiser Permanente. So anything that is not relevant to their business or to their organization is something you don't want to spend time discussing. So let's look at some things that you might want to discuss and things that you would not want to discuss. The worst thing that you can ever say is quitting, that you're going to go off and do some other job, or you want to go traveling in 5 years. Don't talk about that. That's the worst thing you can say. Let's look at some good things to say. So the road to +1, that's totally plausible in 5 years, that you could be one level above potentially. You could talk about gaining more experience. You could talk about in future that you hope to do some mentoring, that in 5 years, if a new person joins in your function, that you would hope to be a person that management would go to help mentor and develop that person as someone who is highly experienced and confident in that role. You might talk about taking on more leadership, not necessarily being in a leadership role, but that you hope to slowly develop your leadership potential. Or if you're not looking to move up, there is other answers. So you could talk about building an outstanding reputation in general, because that's really important, becoming an integral team member, but also developing additional qualifications. So if you have some specific qualification in mind that you hope to achieve in 5 years, now would be a good time to mention that ambition. Or if you're definitely not looking at moving up, talk about being really outstanding in your current role, being someone who is incredibly competent in that function, that someone that can be relied on perfectly, that mentors new staff and is seen as the absolute expert in that particular role. And so that's how you can answer this: where do you see yourself in 5 years? Have a reasonable idea of what your goals are in 5 years and talk about how you're going to get there, and you're going to have a strong answer. The next one is tell me about yourself, and you have to plan this one. And I'm going to show you a structure and what they want you to talk about rather than what people do talk about. They're not interested in your pets. They're not interested in your children. They're interested in, are you the right hire for this job or not? And you need to focus your answer around that. So you want to think about your past. You want to think about now, the characteristics that are in you that are desirable, and then your future. Partly, why do you actually want to work here? So start with your most relevant experience. So when you're talking about your work experience, tell them about the things that are most relevant most. So talk a lot about your most relevant experiences and then just briefly mention your less relevant. So all of your healthcare experience is going to be most useful. So any job you've had in healthcare, that needs to be emphasized, and talk about what you did, what your responsibilities were, what training you did, and what you learned in those roles. Then think about your wider experience. If you've only ever worked in healthcare, that's fine. That's great healthcare experience. But if you've done healthcare plus something else, that other wider outer experience is quite useful. You're bringing something extra into the business, and that can really be anything. Any work experience that you've had, you can link back to Kaiser Permanente. So you can say, I worked in this job, and this has gained experience in this, and I hope to bring this to Kaiser Permanente to do this. And so explain that's helpful. So any job that you've had, mention the skills that you gained, what you're responsible for, and any training that you completed in that is also good to mention. Qualifications, official training that you've done, and any professional achievements is good to mention. So you're talking about your work experience, your skills and qualifications. Is basically a run through of your CV or your resume, focusing on the most relevant, and that's how you talk about your past. Then you think about the qualities that you've got. And so I'm going to give you a list of ways that you can describe yourself that match up with the sort of things that are on job descriptions. And it's a good idea to read the job description and tailor your answer as much as you can to that. So you could talk about being highly reliable, you've got an outstanding attendance record in your previous roles, that you're very, very hardworking, that you're easy to work with, that you're a team player, that you're ambitious. And if you talked about your plans in the 5 years in the future question, this could be a time to bring that back up, that you're passionate about patient care, that you're academically successful. So if you've got good grades, you've got good qualifications, say it, because that's a good thing to have. And that you're vision aligned, that you are passionate about Kaiser Permanente's mission, and that you are excited to be part of them. And what you can also do when talking about the future is think about the answer that you gave to the why Kaiser Permanente interview question, condense it to maybe one sentence to just say that I'm really interested in working for Kaiser Permanente because 2 or 3 things, bring back that answer. Say that you love working in healthcare, especially if you've got lots of experience, you had positive experiences, and this is really something that you're super passionate about. And definitely say, in basically winding down your answer, that you're looking to develop a long-term career at Kaiser Permanente. So to recap, talk about your past, all the experience that you've developed, focusing on your most relevant experience, then list some characteristics that are desirable, and then explain why your future is at this organization, why Kaiser Permanente is part of your future career and is the right place for you. And then you've got a great, strong answer to this. So again, bullet points, have an answer ready, and you'll be so much more confident, and you'll actually show them that you're a good hire rather than rambling and saying lots of non-specific, useless things. Then before we finish, here are some great questions that you could ask at the end of the interview. So they may ask, or they almost always ask, Do you have any questions for us? And you need to have questions. So I'm going to give you some suggestions, and you're probably going to ask 2 to 3 of these. So have the questions ready. Don't try and make up questions at the end. Have a few planned. You may think of others, but definitely have some ready to go. So you might say, what do you like most about working for Kaiser Permanente, and what attracted you to join this organization? And when they say why they joined and what they like, agree with them and bring that in and add that to your previous answers to show that you're really agreeing with them and that you share their interests. Then you could say, is there anything that you would suggest that I do now to be well prepared for starting if successful? And if they suggest you should do this, you should do that, then you say, yes, I will do those things. And you make a commitment there and then to do what they're suggesting, because it shows that you really care about being good at your job. You could say, could you tell me about the induction and professional development program you have for employees in my role? And if they say that there is certain things that they provide to help you develop, make a commitment to taking part in those and show that you're really interested in your own professional development. You could say, I am, of course, very interested in joining Kaiser Permanente. Therefore, could you tell me the next steps in the hiring process and show a real interest in what happens next? You probably do want to know this already, but it's a good idea to ask to find out. And then before you finish, thank the interviewer for their time and end on a positive. Don't ask about transferring to another location. Don't try and negotiate your pay now. Don't ask about time off or holidays. Now is not the time. So I hope this video was helpful to you. I wish you the best of luck in your Kaiser Permanente interview. Please like and subscribe if it was helpful, and post in the comments what questions they asked you. And finally, thank you very much for watching.